All right, we're here with Cal Molinet. I love your YouTube videos. I just want to say that I've been following them a lot, and it's always good to get different perspectives on different things. And I was just curious, what initially got you interested in anarchism?
Uh, I hated cops. Ever since I was a kid. So maybe that's a good place to start.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's a
Um,
popular
so yeah,
popular
that's
viewpoint these days.
and cops are symbolic of the state of government, and so it kind of incites a lot of anti-authoritativeness in my youth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We often hear liberals, saying we have to vote the right people into office. Americans have been voting humans into office for 229 years and are still bitching louder than ever about politicians. Jesus and Buddha will never be running for office. Is it fair to say the scientific results are in and it ain't working?
Yeah, there's no factual evidence to show that politics, voting, government has ever set anyone free in the past 2,000 years plus experiment of it. So I keep failing over and over and over again.
Yeah, well, I was kind of wondering about. I saw your interview with Gary Johnson, and it was interesting because he said, we'll eliminate this tax and that tax, but then we'll add this tax and that tax. It seemed very fun, and you described it as socialism light, and that goes into your whole thing about voting kind of being an act of aggression, and I can totally see your point. However, I'm wondering if people organize countrywide to always elect politicians that were for limited government and shrank the government over time, do you see that as a win for anarchy?
I mean, anarchy in itself exists where there's consensual relationships. So wherever there's a relationship between individuals that's voluntary, that's already anarchy, right? That's already a win for us. Our win is not going to be on a tally board of how many laws, one law that gets repealed when 1,000 more gets reinstated or put into place, right? One's put forward, 1,000 steps backwards. So that's not a win, and that's something that a lot of people don't really understand. Like, maybe they repeal one tax, but there's other ways that they can tax, increase property taxes, increase restrictions on the market, other ways that they'll squeeze and still get their money. Other ways in which even if you voted against a tax, there's other ways that they can still get loans, bonds of that nature, which is still a tax, which was still the city and county will still have to pay for without their input. So it's just a pony show. It's really kind of like when you go when you fight go against a castle and you lay siege to it, and you think that you've broken the outer gates, and you realize then that there's another wall that kind of curves around like a maze that funnels you. But inside that wall, there's also a lot of holes with arrows that people can shoot through, right? They funnel you through there, and that's kind of what voting is. They make you believe that you have a way through freedom or some kind of liberties, but it's really just a funnel to still strip you and take that away from you. It's
I'm sure you have more in common with like libertarians, the hardcore libertarians, than a democratic socialist. Do you feel at all like they are your brothers in anarchism, or not really, because they are still in the whole voting process?
Yeah, I have a lot of friends in the Libertarian Party, and I have friends in the Libertarian Party who have abdicated their throne. I have a friend, Carl Lozer, for example, who was chairman of the local political party in Powhatan County next door to Richmond. And after fighting us, he stopped. And he had the courage to let go of that interest of political rulership himself and joined us as an anarchist. So, yeah, I would say there's a lot of course, overlapping interests, and a lot of the friends I have who are libertarians have interest in ending the state. They just have the method that, that's maybe a cultural thing of camaraderie. It's hard to let go of these sort of things once you've kind of invested a lot of time in it, especially in the Libertarian Party. So yeah, I think it's there's a lot of fruitful endings for a lot of those folks to cross over. So yeah, I would say they're good comrades to have. They're good allies to have for sure.
Did you have a question, Nick?
It can wait towards the end, unless this is the end.
No, you can ask your question if you want to.
Okay. My question is, how will you achieve anarchy? What's your step-by-step process? Because I don't want it to be where we've pulled the troops out of Iraq and then ISIS was formed, so I don't want to see something like that on a global level.
Well, the collapse of the state is inevitable. You have Ludwig von Mises' economic calculation problem.
Agreed.
And so these are all unfunded liabilities, and that's inevitable. So the collapse of the state will occur. When? No one can say for sure. People have been saying about the dollar losing its value for like over 30 years. Ron Paul's been saying it for a long time as well. It's lost 97% of its value. So you see the situation that's going on with the euro. That's with Detroit. Next will be San Francisco, Philadelphia, and these people just spin themselves out of existence and then finally it'll collapse on its own. So there's several ways you could go about it. The way we go about it is to prepare ourselves for that collapse and for the transition. And it doesn't necessarily have to be violent. Most of history of collapse of empires have been very peaceful. And you can look at the collapse of USSR, for example, in the eastern states of Europe. And there wasn't all these bloody wars and chaos that emerged. It was just a lot of independent states. So what would happen with the collapse of the federal government? You'll just have maybe 50 plus more states, which themselves are governments, but it'll push for an interesting evolution of thought to kind of go away from that as well. So ours is a long-term goal. And so politics is a short-term gains, but still you still lose. Right. Ours is long-term to continue to grow our community here in Richmond to the point in size that we could become a strong minority voice of reason in our city, in our community, to kind of push away from restarting or rebooting the matrix or doing another government again, as it were, when the time comes.
Okay. I had my own idea for a global anarchy, but it would come at a cost of up to maybe 100 years of a global federal government to rid ourselves of pirates and organized crime, so there won't be a need for a global federal government.
It kind of reminds me of somebody was asking why there's this communist, why he advocates for communism. What's his end goal with that, and how he hopes to achieve it, or why he still entertains it. And he says he hates people. He thinks it's a sure way to eliminate a lot of people. He thinks the world's already overpopulated, and communism always leads to mass starvation, and so that's a good way out for his dislike for humanity.
Okay, well,
in your heart of hearts, Cal, do you see America? And I agree with you that it's gonna collapse, but do you see it heading towards communism right now, or just a collapse in general with the huge debt and everything?
Well, socialism inevitably leads to communism. The more and more the state monopolizes goods and services, the more towards that end goal it starts to achieve. Or you look at Venezuela with all the state restrictions in the market, and it leads to its collapse. And you certainly do have a lot of market restrictions in this country. Rupert Reason put out a study about past 20, 30, 40 years ago, past few decades of market restrictions is why you're 60% plus poor, because those things cost money. All those government regulations that gets in your way of coding and building infrastructure, licenses, permits, everything adds a lot of money. And so I could see that inevitably it will kind of grind. I don't know towards the extent of full communism. Maybe look at Bernie Sanders, and that guy was hanging a communist flag in his wall when he was out in office in Vermont. And you could look at Trump, but Trump is now, it's hard to see the difference between, who won an election, Hillary or him, with his anti-gun rhetoric and and his tariffs and positions. So whatever they call it, communism, fascism. It just means more government, and more government eventually leads to loss of economic liberties, and inevitably it just collapses. I don't know to the extent of which it'll have a purge of millions dying to that extent. Again, it doesn't have to be. Eastern states of Europe didn't have that. But I would say that in this direction, you really can't know. Like Rothbard Johnson, because he thought that his opponent would bring in a nuclear war, but he did not foresee that Lyndon Johnson would usher in the war on poverty, which and all the negative consequences that came with that, with Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all those welfare programs.
Right.
Devastated Black communities when they were getting a good foothold independently and economically, and it just set them back decades. So it's unforeseeable, but what we do know is the government has a pattern of just messing things up, and that's the only thing that we can count on.
Right.
Wait. You said messing things up. Is it like a 20-year pattern that you noticed as well?
A 20-year pattern? What do you mean by that?
Tippecanoe, basically, but it's different these days.
I don't know about a pattern. I mean, a pattern. I mean by that, you look at every single presidency just keeps getting worse. Presidential executive power keeps growing. The last one managed to assassinate Americans, right? And without due process of law. We'll see where this one continues. Drone bombing certainly have continued, and he's already hired that national security officer who, with the invasion of Iraq as part of his council.
Right.
So you have Jeff Sessions, also continuation of the war on drugs. So, you could say it's hard to tell, but, we have a good idea that it will just continue to get worse and worse and worse. And there's no salvation that kind of comes from these people.
I have a friend that's an ultra progressive, and she, when Trump got into office, she was horrified. And I think right out the bat, he banned our funding to other countries like Planned Parenthood type organizations. And she was like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. And I was just thinking, if progressives think that that's like a huge conservative thing, I mean, we're really in a bad place with statism. I mean, it seems like any cut to any program I don't even know about are a disaster. I mean, is there any way to make headway with statists?
In terms of you can use this opportunity with your progressive friends. This is a good right moment to reach out to leftists. You can say with their distaste for Trump. I don't think Trump's a racist or a sexist or any of these sort of things. I don't think he's a fascist. He's just doing what
you're a bigot now. You're a bigot.
Yeah, I'm a bigot now, right? I think there's other things we can criticize instead of going for virtual signaling. But I think this is maybe a good opportunity to kind of reach out to those that are already dissatisfied with the government because of Trump, and maybe kind of sway them over your side. And not so much people were able to do the same thing with conservatives when Obama was in office. And the conservatives became somewhat of the war hawks, you can say. I mean, not works. The peace doves rallying against the war, whereas the left had been silent for most of those 8 years. So, their interest now in being anti-state, finally reemerging like a cicada, might prove, fruitful in those conversations in the next, people say, 2020, next 8 years or 3 years, but.
I think 2020 is just, one of those visionary things, really.
It's a good.
2020 vision, 2020 election.
Oh, yeah.
What about,
I was about to ask, we talked about communism there for a little bit. What are your thoughts on capitalism from the standpoint of an anarchist?
I love it.
Okay.
Capitalism is on a great thing for my life and for many of my family. And you never hear anyone saying I risk life and limb. I have this tragedy tale to impose upon you of my story of escaping capitalism. But
I made a deal with my employer to work for him, and he gives me money. Therefore, I'm in trouble.
Yeah. Therefore, wage slavery.
Yeah.
Right. You don't see Walmart pointing guns at people to work for them.
No, exactly. Right.
So,
right. This is going back to earlier, but how would we, like, let's say the United States becomes an anarchist country. How would we come to the global, international table and deal with stuff like ISIS or climate change? How would that work?
Well, with other countries, you have a lot of political stuff. Like there's no assassinations. I mean, there was CIA assassinations with Fidel Castro, but it's kind of not. It's like an unspoken thing, which like party leaders just don't do that to one another. Assassination markers would be an interesting thing. Of course, if you have Kim Jong-un, threatening to nuke this region, then you just send a drone out there and drop a C4 bomb over his place of living and just let it end at that. So I don't think it'll be as
Brent was telling me that a while ago that he thought that should be done too.
It wouldn't be as it's
easier said than done.
It's actually probably
complicated.
Pretty easy too.
Right.
No, it's going to be much harder than you may believe.
With North Korea, I know they have to Photoshop everything, right? They do their missile tests, and it actually turns out, when they release the photos, and you have all the sleuths, Photoshops, kind of looking out there and saying, these are actually copies. They really don't have much of armaments out there.
Jeez.
Would people generally, in your view, have more wealth with anarchy rule? There's still needs and services that everybody has. So it would just be sort of, they would voluntarily pay for these needs and services. Would it be the same? Would there still be social classes?
Yeah, I mean, you still have a stratus of different types of wealth accumulation, of course. Yeah, that's going to happen with the state, with the other state. That's just, it depends on how much you have an interest in capitalism and entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs are in the epicenter of capitalism, and not everyone's cut out to be an entrepreneur. But that's a lot of dedication, a lot of time, a lot of hours put into that. It's an art, you can say, but I would say certainly nearly 1/3 of your income will not go towards taxes, which you have to work for an entire year. So 1/3 of an entire year goes to paying taxes. So taxes will make up nearly half your income for a lot of people, 30 to 50%. So, I think that's a lot of money back in your pocket. That's a lot of wealth that you can invest, that you can grow other interesting opportunities for yourself and your family. And people talk about this generation or the Tide Pod generations, but the generations before us are the ones that screwed over the younger ones with their Social Security and with all their using the unborn as a collateral for to make themselves the wealthiest group of people on the planet has ever known, and we'll never have a taste of that under the state. So I would say that wealth will be an interesting place to look at, especially with the rise of cryptocurrency. And some people, I would say cryptocurrency has given maybe perhaps a younger generation a leverage against this failing currency, against being used as collateral and these unfunded liabilities that they'll never see, like Social Security, maybe as a way out.
Is that Bitcoin?
Maybe
that's
a
part of that?
Yeah, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Monero, Litecoin. And then we'll see how that turns out. And it's been a good past year for cryptocurrencies.
Is the idea of a full, actual fully function system based on no rulership, is that more like a utopia dream, or could that actually be done and we could actually function this thing? Do you think?
So I would say that the idea that the right kind of government, can solve these kind of problems and solutions here and there, just the right kind of regulation, which means to imply that, all the other, hundreds and thousands of other regulations have been put into place that didn't work whenever they have to come back for another reform. That seems utopian. that maybe after all these different attempts of trying government throughout the past 2,000 years plus can work and continues to fail and collapse over and over again, can work at the expense of the lives of tens of millions. I think we have ample evidence from the 20th century alone of the practice of socialism that leads to the wholesale slaughter of mass starvation from Maoist China to the Holodomor famine in Ukraine that just doesn't work. And today now in Venezuela, people are storming zoos. I think that's utopian to still thinking that politics can still save you. But with the anarchy, it's that's against that political rulership.
It seems like even though
and we can still have rules.
Yeah. And it seems like even though like the founding fathers of America, as much as they tried to put in all the fail safes and everything into the Constitution and all the Federalist Papers and everything, that the new age politicians have still been able to figure out how to rule corruptly, it seems. So you might be right that it doesn't really matter what form of government you put in, somebody's going to find a loophole to gain power.
Right.
Now, you did mention the elimination of taxes earlier, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe there may be a new form of quote-unquote taxes, but in the form of unions, insurance companies, heck, even membership to guilds in order to maintain the roads for trade and such, and security, public security.
Are you asking, would I consider those taxes?
Or do you believe that those can be a good way to replace taxes?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, roads are not that technological marvel. They've been, being built for like over 2,000 years. You have roads still, exist today from Rome, cobblestones. But I would say that it turns. There's a story in India. He's trying to get his wife to a hospital. And the hospital was just on the other side of the mountain, and she died. Couldn't make it in time, and because of the government roads, they're just too congested. So he spent over a decade just carving right through that mountain to make a shortcut, to make a road, so that no one else will have to, suffer a loss as he did with his wife. And so you have one man that could carve right through a mountain and make a road, and it's not something that's because you imbue the magical words of government, right? Like some kind of hocus pocus, and that's the solution, or that it can do no wrong and it can do anything, no better than any other market service. And most of the roads in the United States were private roads before the government monopolized it through eminent domain and took them over. So we have historical evidence of how roads were maintained, of how roads were private, and how they were charged voluntarily. Right. So a lot of these things, a lot of people talk about, like, what about this or that? History, we have an example of how the market provided pretty much all these services until government got rid of them and put them out of business. Like Lysander Spooner's American Little Milk Company, and he competed against the USPS until the Congress shut him down, sued him out of business, passed a law that says, okay, we're not having that again. No one's allowed to compete with the USPS.
Right.
So we have a lot of examples of that sort.
Do you believe that taxes are theft, essentially? Because I'll just say this: I believe taxes are theft. So I believe that taking a third of my paycheck, which I drive my truck, I work my vehicle, I bust my ass 12 hours a day, and I get a paycheck, that I should get that whole paycheck.
I believe the correct terms. Taxes is the price for living in a civilization of horror and terror, and being thrown into cages for victimless crimes, and drone bombing children overseas, and blowing up field hospitals.
So for sure. So theft to fund terrorism worldwide.
Right. Yeah.
So they're stealing from the American people to hurt other people. So they're hurting everyone.
They hurt everybody. Yeah. Yes. Taxes is theft. We're going to have actually a taxation is theft rally here in Richmond. Our first one. We're going to do it on the 15th because the tax day is coming soon.
I need to find the group of anarchists in my area.
Yeah. Find us on Facebook. We have a forum. Might give you good ideas on how and where to start and start branching off.
Would you tell us a little bit about Liberate RVA? Like, what have you been doing in your organization?
So our organization, RVA, stands for Richmond, Virginia. So it's about an hour and a half south of Washington, D.C. And we grow, a lot of people say, it's hard to find like-minded people. And so we actually grow such like-minded people of a community here of a variety, rich different backgrounds, from students to parents, from all different types of occupations. And we have gun clubs that we go to, shooting at the range at a private land. We have meetings that we come to. We have a friend who owns a bar, so we host a lot of our Liberty social hours, just drinking and philosophizing, having fun there as well. And so we also have our annual festival, Anarchon. The dates will be released this week. And so we just do a lot of things as a tribe to kind of nurture those kinds of relationships and friendships, and try to grow this free society based on consent within the state. Because anarchy exists wherever there's consent, and pushing for a long-term goal of growing that community in larger numbers and size here in Richmond. So we've been doing this since 2012, and yeah, it's been a remarkable journey since. I've made tons of friends just doing that. When I do my spreading anarchy thing, like around here in Richmond, I've made a lot of friends. And my roommate, we met just talk about anarchy, and then like a week later, it's like, yeah, you know what? I think I'm an anarchist, and that was that.
Okay. This is just more of a suggestion because you mentioned all that, and I mean, first of all, I don't believe that any vote is a wasted vote. Especially if you write in, I don't want anybody in office. I'm going to write empty seat. I don't want nobody in office. Do you think you could push that forward?
I mean, I think that's sort of stuff they're just throwing in the trash, right?
Oh, no. But we have to count the votes. So every submitted ballot is a vote, so might as well.
That's what they tell you. That's what they tell you.
Yeah, that's what they tell you. Yeah.
Right.
What about the people who didn't vote? Doesn't that count?
Why did they not vote is the question.
I think that's their vote, not voting, right?
Because it's virtually worthless.
Yeah, you're saying that voting is their voice, right? Would not voting then be a vote? You can say.
Well,
right.
In my little world, it's if you have the liberty to vote and you decide not to vote, then why should I listen to you? It's obviously you want to be quiet about all this. But
silence. Nick, silence is another form of communication. You'd understand that, right? Silence can mean a lot more than speaking.
Well, here's how I see it as. You got a light bulb. Is the light bulb on or off? Oh, no light bulb. I guess I won't have to tally anything there.
Yeah, but there's somebody over in the corner with a candle. What are you going to say about that?
Okay, they got a candle. That's good enough for me. But still, it's the analogy is that, and here's the thing. Even though I do admit, even though such votes will not be counted, if there's a news investigation on the actual numbers and they see that more than 50% does not want anybody in office, how much would that scare the federal government? Without any blood, of course.
Well, in Australia, you have to vote. Everyone has to vote. If you don't, they fine you. And of course, you don't pay that fine, they kick down your door and throw you into jail, right? Murder you if you try to escape. And that's how voting works in Australia. It's a real Hunger Games, forced participation.
Damn.
And this, yeah. So like this interest.
I know that we're under a horrible government, but we have it way better than the world fucking makes it sound. I swear to God. We're constantly berated with shit that people are telling us. You're the worst country. Everything is wrong. Everything is horrible. We got kids eating Tide Pods. I think we're fine.
Why can't they do drugs like normal people?
Right? Like, go get some booger sugar, for fuck's sake.
And just so you know, Cal, our friend Nick here, he's a big government guy. Just so you know.
Well,
what are socialists? They look up to people like Karl Marx, Che Guevara. Is there anarchist figures in history that people can look at?
Yes. Lysander Spooner, American anarchist from the 1800s. He was anti-slavery. He was an abolitionist. He was an anti-government, anti-state. He wrote the Constitution of No Authority, specifying that I never signed a contract. Right, a contract is beholden to those who sign it, and I never did. And so, he saw taxation as being theft as well, and he challenged his entrepreneurial might against the United States Postal Service and succeeded. He forced them to lower the prices from $3 and some cents to all the way to 3 cents. So he's the father of the 3 cent stamp.
What's his name again? Can you give me his name?
Lysander, Lysander, Spooner, Spooner. So Lysander Spooner, American anarchist, right here in this country. So we have a good starting point history of that. Other people behind there, we don't want to look at the economic side. Look at Ludwig von Mises, who escaped Nazi Germany. Occupation coming through and spreading through that region, and escaped here to the United States and started all over and helped with the foundation of the Mises Institute. Well, his name being lent towards that, but his prodigies were like Rothbard and a lot of other anarcho-capitalists from that line of school of thought, of economics, you could say. And so I would say those people are good people to start with. In terms of capitalism and push towards a virtue of selfishness, you have Ayn Rand,
right?
Escaped the horrors of Russia, communist Russia, and actually come here to the United States, learn a new language, and wrote books detailing the horrors of government, what government inevitably does to the individual, the smallest minority. So yeah, we have a lot of good people on our side.
Is there one particular book that you would suggest for a starter?
Suggest Henry Hazlitt's Economic in One Lesson. It's a good primer in understanding economics, human behavior, and this relationship to the state, and trying to force behavior that always leads to negative consequences and yields not that much productivity as you might imagine, in terms of its misuse and allocation of resources, taxes, you can say as well, of humanity. And so, yeah, Henry Hazlitt's, you can find that for free online. There's a PDF all over the place. I think the Mises Institute or FEE might have them on their website as well.
And I thank you just, so much for being here with us this morning. It's an absolute pleasure. Anything that you want to promote, any other sites or where we can find you?
I have a YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel you can find under my name, Kal Moloney, Kal. Well, I guess it might be in the description, but I've been doing a lot of spreading anarchy stuff outside of the White House and having fun conversations with a lot of gun advocates. And there's the most interesting one I met was this guy who was saying that, maybe, no one should be armed. No one should have weapons. It's like, only the government. He was making a claim, but there's a certain group of people called the Jews during, World War II that didn't turn out so well for them being disarmed. And he's saying that good for them. I think if they had guns, it might have turned out to be a much worse outcome for the Jews. And I was telling, who are you to say what's, how to defend yourself properly or not, or the outcomes that could be? Are you saying that they should just march silently and peacefully into those train carts? And he said yes. He said
yeah, I think I saw that. He said something, if I'm remembering correctly, about his dad teaching him to not like guns. Did he say? Am I just imagining that, or?
I don't remember. Something like that.
Well, I commented on there. His dad taught him to hate objects.
Right. Yeah. So you can find my videos on that YouTube channel. And it's been great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on the Green Henry Show. And you guys.
Always a pleasure. Have a great one.
Yep. Hopefully we'll have people stop chasing all those red herrings.
Stay liberated, guys.
Yep. Thank you.